Okay.
So we're here this afternoon with David Faigman, who is the DeGardi Distinguished Professor at UC Hastings College of Law in San Francisco and the Director of the UCSF-UC Hastings Consortium on Law, Science, and Health Policy.
That's correct.
Thank you, David. Thank you for sitting with us and talking.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. And so let me ask you to tell us how you first got connected with the Institute for Health Policy Studies.
Well, we ran a number of steering committees back in the sort of mid-2000s. I met with Joe Castro, Sally Marshall, and others, and started to meet a number of senior people around UCSF. And one of the big issues right at the start was where the consortium and where UC Hastings would more or less plug in at UCSF. And UCSF, of course, is a sprawling, huge health university with many schools and many divisions. And so as we were looking around, IHPS was really a natural partner. So when we met with Claire, really right from the start, she was an empowering force. She worked with us, understood the challenges that are associated with institution building. She understood how to create alliances and partnerships with different parts of UCSF. She's so well respected in the chancellor's office and all around campus that she really sort of adopted us as an institution, and so IHPS just turned out to be the natural collaborative partner for the consortium.
And tell me, what is the consortium about? How is it connected to health policy?
So the consortium was formally kicked off, if you will, sort of started as an attempt to build something in 2009. But UC Hastings and UCSF, of course, have had decades of collaboration and partnership. I've been working with psychiatry since I started back in 1987. And so in the late 90s and early 2000s, the idea came around to try to formalize the relationship between the two institutions. And there's a natural partnership there, obviously, because UC Hastings is the only standalone law school in the University of California system. UCSF is a standalone health university. And it's kind of like those romantic comedies that everybody looking in from the outside would say, these two have to get together, and it just takes the entire movie for them finally to realize it themselves. So in some ways, this is kind of the we're consummating an obvious relationship that should have happened many years ago. So the consortium, which began in 2009, really had to define itself and where we were going to go in partnership with UCSF. And we, in collaboration with yourself, Dan, and others, tried to identify the three main mission areas that we would pursue. And those are education, research, and clinical training and clinical service. And so once we defined those areas, it was much easier to start building out. And of course, education, research, and clinical training are not independent. They're not insular, they overlap. So educational opportunities lead into research collaborations, and research collaborations turn into educational opportunities, and clinical training, of course, has a little bit of both. But once we sort of define those main areas of focus, we were able to start building programs. And so now what the consortium does with UCSF and very much with IHPS is look for opportunities to partner in enhancing opportunities in interdisciplinary training, in interdisciplinary research, and interdisciplinary professional collaborations in clinical training and service. And in a sense, we are the policy, legal, translational aspect of what the health policy researchers, the scientists at IHPS and at UCSF are doing. So we're helping to bridge what the scientists learn and what the scientists have to teach us with policy formation and legal change.
So you have a national, international reputation as a constitutional scholar. You work with institutions all over the country on issues related to science and law and policy, particularly around neuroscience and forensic psychiatry. You have a connection with a lot of different institutions, and I'm curious if you can speak, given that background, to what are the things that make IHPS unique or special in the landscape of policy and law in the nation today?
Well, I think it's, my experience has been exactly at that really the crossroads of science and legal policy and lawmaking. So I've been on a National Research Council, National Academies panel where I was the only lawyer with a group of scientists. I'm on the MacArthur Law and Neuroscience Network, which is a group of lawyers and legal scholars and neuroscientists and statisticians and behavioral psychologists. And one of the things that I learned was that in these interdisciplinary collaborations, you need people that understand one another's language, and that when you bring knowledge, scientific knowledge, together with policy formation, the lawyers have to understand the science and the scientists have to understand the policy and the law. And what IHPS brings to the table, and it's really sort of a built-in institutional expertise, is understanding that juncture, understanding that intersection. And so it's just been an incredible honor, really, and a real pleasure to connect with and partner with IHPS, because in a sense it embodies all of the things that I loved about the National Academies and all of the things I love about MacArthur, which is the ability to think and act in cross-disciplinary fashion. And so IHPS embodies that. The people at IHPS are really at the top of their fields, and they understand what we are. Obviously bring some added value to it, but it's added value to a group of people who understand the vocabulary, they understand the processes, they understand the way of thinking. And so we have this foundation where we sit at this intersection between law and health policy to move forward from there. And so it's really, IHPS in a sense is a springboard to really great achievements and great opportunity.
And it's been a terrific thing for myself, and I know many other faculty at IHPS and elsewhere at UCSF. I'm wondering if you can talk about, say, 2 or 3 of the initiatives or programs or activities that that are most exciting from your perspective at UC Hastings and that IHPS is involved with.
Sure. Well, IHPS, and because you are at IHPS and you're the associate director of the consortium, in a sense, IHPS has been a partner with just about everything that the consortium does. But we also partner with other sections of UCSF, and IHPS has facilitated those as well. So even when we are working with CTSI or working with psychiatry or working with Lakeside Clinic, we often go back to IHPS for advice, for guidance, and for assistance, which has just been fantastic. So in a sense, in all honesty, the consortium wouldn't exist and wouldn't have the authority and power that it has today in almost anything that we do without the backing of IHPS. And that goes, we apply for a National Science Foundation grant. IHPS is there to help us along. We're a bunch of lawyers. We don't typically go to the federal government, NIH or NSF, for major funding, and IHPS has held our hand through that process. But more specifically, really in all the areas, but in education, of course, we're working very closely with IHPS on the development of the health policy and law degree, which is proposed to, we hope, begin in 2014. And that degree will actually be jointly conferred by UCSF and UC Hastings, and it's a true collaborative effort. And the candidates the graduate candidates that are in the program will be immersed in health policy at IHPS and at the School of Medicine, and they will be immersed in legal processes and legal classes at UC Hastings. And there'll be a lot of cross-listed classes and opportunities to cross-fertilize those areas of expertise. So that's on the education side. And then on top of that, I mean, HPL, the Health Policy Law degree, is one degree. We've also begun the Master of Studies in Law, which IHPS was really instrumental in helping us think through who the health professionals and scientists that would participate in that kind of a program. On the research side, we've been very active. We've worked with IHPS on an NIH grant that you led, Jamie King, the Associate Director on the UC Hastings side, is a participant in that. Tracy Woodruff is a co-PI on a grant that I did with National Science Foundation. We had the benefit of IHPS in working with the Clinical Training and Science Institute, CTSI, in developing legal parameters for price transparency work that's been supported by the Andy Grove Foundation. So really we have looked for and have taken advantage of a lot of opportunities on the research side and achieved and received funding to support those activities with IHPS's great assistance. And then on the clinical training side, our major initiative has been the Medical Legal Partnership for Seniors, and that is primarily through the medical school and the hospital, but the okay, okay, that's right. Let me go back on that. Yeah. The other major program that IHPS has been very helpful with us on is the Medical Legal Partnership for Seniors. The Medical Legal Partnership for Seniors is mainly through the medical center and the medical school, but at the same time in designing a legal clinic that would be situated at a medical clinic and thinking through all the ethical issues, all the health policy issues. It was really the people at IHPS that helped us construct that and frame that. So again, really wherever we turn, IHPS in a sense is our sort of founding partner in helping us maneuver through what are many obstacles and many challenges, but so far we've been extraordinarily successful in maneuvering through, over and around all of them.
Terrific. You're sort of touching on, and maybe you can just say a couple comments about some of the challenges that you faced and things that have been most satisfying about this working relationship.
Well, there are a lot of things that I didn't think were going to be challenges before we started that turned out to be challenges, from the trivial to the profound. The trivial being that UCSF is on the quarter system and UC Hastings is on the semester system, and so creating cross-listed classes, coordinating schedules turned out to be a little bit more difficult than we expected, and so just the challenges associated with coordinating between institutions, that although we're standalone and you're standalone, there's a lot of bureaucracy that inevitably has to be built up to support both of them, and they need to get through that. On the more profound side, there's very interesting problems in terms of differences in ethics. So privacy issues around HIPAA that affect the medical side are different than the attorney-client ethical privacy provisions. And so when you put medical doctors or health professionals and scientists together with lawyers, there are a lot of sort of professional challenges that are really deep in each of the two cultures that need to be coordinated and worked through. And so far, none of them have been, fatal to any of our initiatives, but they are things that we have to stop and really think about.
Are there other comments or stories that we should hear about?
I think that we've been just incredibly successful so far in everything we've pursued. When we developed the Medical Legal Partnership for Seniors, we had to develop a memorandum of understanding. It took some time. You were very involved in that, getting it through the various levels of approvals that it needed. We have a new affiliation agreement between the two institutions. So I think that there's just going to be increasing and greater collaboration and cooperation between the two universities. So my colleagues often accuse me of looking to take over the world. And to some extent, there may be some truth in that. And it's wonderful to have IHPS and Claire Brindis and the entire group of professionals at IHPS on our side as we march forward to take over that world.
Perfect. Well, I think
I got one brief question. We can answer off the record or on the record.
Sure.
If you think it's appropriate. If certain medical policies come forward and they have legal ramifications, how would UC Hastings weigh in on that and render a legal opinion?
Well, it's a good question. One of the challenges. So one of the challenges, of course, has been that we are an academic institution, as UCSF is an academic institution. And so just as a scientist might research, for example, the cost-benefit value of mammograms and at what age women should undergo a mammogram in order to do breast cancer screening, there are issues about the risks and benefits of false positives and false negatives. And so as scientists, you come up with certain results and, in a sense, make certain recommendations, but that has to get filtered through practicing physicians at the clinical level, so that if a woman wouldn't rely on the research, she would talk to her doctor under the circumstances. In a sense, we are parallel to that. So we will work with scientists and talk about what the legal ramifications of certain issues are, what perhaps even professional responsibilities might be under existing law, but we're not giving legal advice, we're giving academic advice. And so whatever research we come up with, just like with a health scientist, a legal academic, you'd have to run that advice through an attorney, because you typically have to make a judgment about the individual and what their sort of cost-benefit, comfort levels are. And so we don't really give legal advice. UCSF has a general counsel's office to do that. We're in the business of giving academic knowledge and research results.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Thanks.
Are we good? Or should I?
Are we good? Any other thoughts?
No, not off the top of my head. I can you think of any stories that, I don't know if there's any stories I haven't
So aside
told.
from the pet policy, which is obviously the most compelling story, I think the story of, it's a little fresh, which in maybe this is, we need to think about this, but I think the price transparency story is very interesting in terms of how a purely academic issue, how wouldn't it be great if prices were available for consumers? Then refracted through the law, suddenly becomes a very, very powerful, dangerous. That knowledge has become quite explosive.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about how this purely academic exercise around economic costs for healthcare, transmogrified through the lens of the law, has now become a real sort of interesting issue on our camp at UCSF and the role that this consortium has played in that.
Okay. Okay. So the issue is we've been involved with CTSI doing legal research on issues surrounding price transparency, and the basic insight is the more transparent prices are from the top down, the more efficient the markets will be. And so the sort of off-the-cuff thinking is that if you have greater transparency, you'll have more efficient markets and prices will come down. So competition will kick in. And right now, prices simply are not transparent. So we were brought along to kind of ask the question, if prices are not transparent now, why are they not transparent, and can the law force them to be transparent, and what theories might drive that? And so the initial question that we ran up against in the first place was the question of whether the initial insight is even correct in the first instance, that if you really have transparency of prices, will that make markets more efficient and bring price down? And there are economic theories that suggest it'll actually work in exactly the opposite way, that you'll have oligopolistic type policies, that people now know what you're charging and will be able to use that to actually raise prices rather than lower prices. So there's an economic question in the first place whether the theory is correct. But then we also looked at things like antitrust violations. So if there's an accusation that a particular provider is using market power in one place to leverage higher prices in the second place, does that violate the antitrust laws? And if it does, what might be done about that? And then there are issues about where prices exist. If they exist in contracts, can customers who sign those contracts divulge that information? And companies have taken the position on occasion that divulging that information would be divulging a trade secret, and the law protects trade secrets. So that's another issue. And so there are a number of legal issues that arise. And of course, again, as an academic institution, what we're interested in doing is looking at really what are, in a sort of a neutral way, what are all the arguments on every side of the coin, and what would make the most sense in terms of various avenues that you might pursue to reach the ultimate goal of lowering prices and improving quality. So the ideal situation, of course, are low prices, competitive prices, and high quality, and consumers can choose the best deal, just like they might with a car or an oven or a TV set. And what that does, of course, is we then do that research, and it's natural to ask the question, well, can we pursue a cause of action, say for antitrust, or can we act notwithstanding, that's a legal term, despite the possibility of a trade secret difficulty, or are there other ways to make transparent the prices? And of course, when you are a law school, you're perceived as giving legal advice at some level. Of course, that's not what we're doing. But at the same time, we are setting forth the legal framework that applies in this context. So people naturally move to that next step. And we're partnering with UCSF. And UCSF is a provider in this market. And when the Attorney General is worrying about market efficiencies, the Attorney General may or may not make distinctions between one hospital and another hospital. And so we as academic researchers, and UCSF scientists as researchers, also have this potentially relationship that's in tension with UCSF as a medical provider in a certain climate or marketplace that UCSF has to act in and survive in. And so we operate kind of in parallel to that universe, and the question of sort of how that all gets resolved and what everybody does. We have tenure, we have academic freedom, so we want to pursue what is reasonable for us as researchers and be as transparent as we can be about what our findings are and what people decide to do in light of that new knowledge. And a lot of it is uncertain. Whether an antitrust action would be successful is very iffy, very questionable. Whether you would prevail in a trade secret cause of action is very questionable. So a lot of the law, and this is just the reality of the law, is that although you may have doctrine that is fairly clear at the periphery, in the grand middle ground it's very gray and very messy, and the real world can be very messy. And so I think what you were alluding to was at UCSF there are these cross currents, and the consortium and UC Hastings as academics are sort of caught in those cross currents a little bit. And I think it's in a good way. I think that it's caught in the cross currents, meaning that we are contributing to the debate, and what we need in this context is a full and complete debate to see, so everybody can decide what the next steps are.